There is a person in your life, maybe at work, maybe in your social circle, who always seems to be doing well. New car, nice clothes, always picking up the tab. And then there's another person. Quiet, unassuming, drives something old, don't talk about money, doesn't seem particularly impressed by the things other people want. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most financial content will never actually say out loud. In the majority of cases, the first person is financially fragile, and the second person is financially free. The loudest signal of wealth is often the quietest indicator of it. And the people who have genuinely mastered money, not just earned a lot of it, but actually mastered it at a psychological level, tend to be nearly invisible. They don't look like what we expect wealth to look like. They don't behave the way our culture tells us wealthy people should behave, which raises a question that behavioral science has been quietly investigating for decades. What is actually happening in the mind of someone who manages money with extreme, almost unusual skill?
Before we go deep into the psychology, let's sit with a number that should stop you in your tracks. As of 2025, approximately 67% of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck, according to data compiled by Investopedia and Lending Club. That means nearly 7 in 10 people in one of the wealthiest economies in human history are one unexpected expense away from the financial crisis. The critical detail here, the one that fundamentally shifts the conversation, is that this figure includes people earning 6 figures. Income alone does not protect you. A 2025 Bank of America Institute report found that nearly 1 in 4 American households across all income brackets live without any meaningful financial cushion. What this data makes clear is that financial instability is not primarily an income problem. It is a behavioral and psychological problem. 2 people with identical salaries can end up in radically different financial positions a decade later, not because one was smarter or luckier, but because of invisible psychological patterns operating beneath the surface of every financial decision. That is what this video is about, the specific psychological architecture that separates those 2 people. The first and perhaps most fundamental psychological difference lies in how elite money managers perceive time, specifically how they perceive their future self. Dr. Hal Hershfield, a professor of behavioral decision-making and psychology at UCLA's Anderson School of Management, has spent years studying what he calls future self continuity. His research reveals something both surprising and deeply humanizing. When participants with poor financial habits are shown aged images of themselves using virtual reality technology, they dramatically increase their stated willingness to save for retirement. Why? Because for most people, the 60-year-old version of themselves feels like a stranger. The brain does not emotionally connect present decisions to a future person it does not recognize. Hershfield's fMRI research showed that many people's brains process their future selves in the same neural region used to process other people, not themselves. People who struggle with money are not lazy or irresponsible at their core. They are, in a very literal neurological sense, saving against a stranger. Elite money managers, by contrast, maintain a continuous, emotionally vivid relationship with who they are going to become. Every financial decision they make carries the emotional weight of a relationship. Once you understand this, the entire framing of delayed gratification changes. We have been taught to think of restraint as discipline, a gritted-teeth act of willpower against an impulse. But for people with high future self-continuity, choosing not to spend is not a denial. It is something closer to an act of care. When someone with this psychological profile decides not to upgrade their lifestyle after a raise, they are not suffering through sacrifice. They are doing something that feels, at an emotional level, like protecting someone they love. The sacrifice is not directed at an abstract future concept. It is directed at a person they feel connected to, themselves, older, resting, free from the anxiety that financial insecurity creates. One framing that circulates authentically in financial communities captures this precisely. I don't feel like I'm depriving myself today. I feel like I'm paying my older self to relax. That sentence is not a productivity aphorism. It is a description of a very specific psychological state, one where present and future self are experienced as continuous, where empathy for yourself across time becomes the engine of financial behavior. The second defining feature of the elite money manager's psychology is what they fundamentally believe money is for. In his widely influential work, The Psychology of Money, author and behavioral analyst Morgan Housel argues that the highest use of money is not consumption, and it is not even investment in the traditional sense. It is the ability to control your own time. He writes, "The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays." This is not a sentiment unique to one writer. It is grounded in self-determination theory, the foundational psychological framework developed by researchers Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, which identifies autonomy, the experience of being the author of your own life, as one of the deepest human psychological needs. People with extreme money management skills are not saving toward a number on a screen. They are building a specific psychological condition, the freedom to walk away from a job that is diminishing them, from a situation that is controlling them. Every dollar they save is not stored status, it is stored autonomy. It is the capacity, quietly accumulating in the background, to say no. To understand why most people never develop this psychology, we need to understand the opposing force, and it is ancient. In 1899, the economist and sociologist Thorstein Veblen introduced the concept of conspicuous consumption in his landmark work, The Theory of the Leisure Class. His observation was precise. Human beings across cultures and centuries use visible spending as a mechanism of status signaling. We buy things not solely for their utility, but to communicate our position within the social hierarchy. Evolutionary psychologists have since expanded this framework, arguing that resource signaling served an adaptive function in small ancestral groups, where demonstrating surplus resources improved social standing, access to mates, and tribal security. The problem is that this ancient programming is now running on credit cards, social media feeds, and a consumer economy specifically engineered to amplify it. The drive to signal has never disappeared. It has merely found new and more expensive channels. People who are financially struggling are not failing because they are weak. Many of them are simply executing an evolutionary program that once kept their ancestors alive, but that now quietly depletes their financial security while making them look exactly the way the algorithm wants them to look. In 1966, psychologist Julian Rotter introduced one of the most enduring concepts in behavioral science, the locus of control. Rotter's framework distinguishes between people who believe their outcomes are primarily the result of their own decisions and behavior, an internal locus, and those who believe outcomes are primarily determined by external forces like luck, circumstance, or other people, an external locus. Decades of research have consistently linked an internal locus of control to better financial outcomes. A 2025 study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that wealthier individuals demonstrated significantly higher internal locus of control scores than their less wealthy counterparts. People with this orientation do not wait to be rescued by a market rally, a raise, or a windfall. They build systems, make decisions, and take responsibility for where they end up. This internal orientation also explains the stealth wealth phenomenon. When your sense of self-worth is generated internally rather than validated externally, you simply don't need the BMW to feel sufficient. The car becomes irrelevant to your identity. Your identity is not something you wear or drive. It is something you have quietly constructed, mostly invisible to everyone around you. In 1971, psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell described what they called the hedonic treadmill, the mechanism by which human beings adapt to improved circumstances and return to a relatively stable emotional baseline. A raise feels extraordinary for a few weeks and then becomes the new normal. A new car is thrilling and then becomes invisible. The treadmill keeps moving, and the only way to feel good on it is to keep accelerating, to earn more, spend more, acquire more. For most people, income growth and spending growth move in near-perfect lockstep. This is lifestyle creep, and it is not a character flaw. It is the predictable output of a brain that adapts rapidly to new circumstances and immediately begins seeking the next elevation. What makes elite money managers psychologically distinct is that they have consciously or intuitively stepped off the treadmill. They define an enough threshold, a lifestyle level they find genuinely comfortable, and they refuse to move that line as their income grows. Instead of funding lifestyle inflation, they redirect surplus income toward assets and autonomy. Their expenses stay flat while their financial freedom compounds quietly beneath the surface. This is not deprivation. It is one of the most psychologically sophisticated moves a human being can make. It would be dishonest to present this psychological profile as frictionless. It is not. There is a real social cost to operating this way, and it deserves to be acknowledged. When your self-worth is internally generated, when you refuse to signal status, when you are building something invisible while people around you are building something visible, you will be misunderstood. You will be underestimated. You will sit in meetings with people who assume they know your financial reality by the car you drive or the watch you don't wear. There will be social moments where the gap between how you appear and who you actually are creates a quiet, particular kind of loneliness. This is the contrast at the heart of this entire psychological profile, not just appearance versus reality, but the willingness to inhabit that gap indefinitely, without the world needing to close it for you.
If this feels relatable with you, subscribe. Take your time with it. Share it with someone who needs to feel less alone in this. And remember, understanding why is always the first honest step toward anything different.